He followed his maid after midnight and discovered who stole her life. For 5 years, a woman walked out the back door of the same house every night at exactly 10 o'clock. She always carried the same cloth bundle. She always took the same route. And she always came back before sunrise. Nobody questioned it. Nobody followed her. Nobody even noticed. Until one man did. At first, he believed he was investigating a theft. A missing loaf of bread. A few pieces of fruit. Small portions of leftovers disappearing from a kitchen that supplied more food than most families could eat in a week. But the truth waiting 3 blocks away had nothing to do with food. It had everything to do with a child who lost her parents. A fortune that vanished. A family secret buried for 17 years. And a betrayal so complete that the woman responsible had spent nearly 2 decades believing she would never be caught. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Harlan Booker Voss had spent most of his life believing that every problem had a logical explanation. At 52, he had already achieved everything society said a man should want. Money, success, recognition. The company he built had made him wealthy enough to never work another day in his life. Yet retirement had created a strange emptiness he could never explain. His days felt longer. His home felt quieter. And the people around him seemed increasingly distant. The only constant presence in his house was Mabel Elaine Fontaine. She had worked for him for 5 years. She prepared meals, maintained the house, handled schedules, managed details he rarely noticed. She was reliable, efficient, invisible. At least that was what he thought. Then one evening, he noticed something strange. A loaf of sourdough bread purchased that morning was missing. The following week, several apples disappeared. A few days later, portions of roast chicken could not be accounted for. The missing food was insignificant. Yet Harlan had built an entire career noticing small inconsistencies. Tiny details often revealed larger truths. He began watching. For 3 weeks, he said nothing. For 3 weeks, he simply observed. Every night at 10 o'clock, Mabel wrapped small portions of food inside a cloth bundle. Every night, she slipped quietly out the back door. Every night, she returned hours later. And every night, she believed nobody knew. Then came the night he followed her. The streets of San Francisco felt different after dark. Pacific Heights remained beautiful, orderly, predictable. But as Mabel walked farther from the neighborhoods Harlan knew, the city changed. Luxury homes became aging apartment buildings. Bright storefronts became darkened windows. The distance between their worlds seemed to grow with every block. 3 blocks later, she stopped. Across the street stood an abandoned construction project. The skeletal remains of what had once been planned as luxury housing stretched into the darkness. The development had collapsed 18 months earlier when funding disappeared. Harlan remembered receiving investment offers connected to the project. He had declined. The place had been abandoned ever since. Or so he believed. Mabel approached a damaged section of fencing. She slipped through an opening and disappeared. Harlan waited, then followed. What he found inside immediately shattered every assumption he had made. The abandoned site was not abandoned. People lived there. Not dozens. Only 4. Yet someone had transformed a forgotten corner of the unfinished structure into something resembling a home. Blankets covered concrete floors. Makeshift shelves held books. Small lanterns provided light. And on nearly every wall were drawings. Hundreds of drawings. Detailed charcoal sketches covering entire sections of concrete. City skylines. Faces. Buildings. Stars. Memories. Harlan stood frozen. The drawings were extraordinary. Near the center of the room sat a young man sketching beneath a lamp. His concentration never broke. His pencil moved continuously. Nearby sat a woman with forearm crutches dividing food into equal portions. Not slightly equal, perfectly equal. Every piece measured carefully, every serving identical. Across from her sat another young man staring toward the entrance. The moment Mabel appeared, his face changed. Relief, recognition, joy. It appeared instantly, as though her arrival mattered more than the food she carried. And then something happened Harlan did not expect. Mabel sat down, opened an old journal, and began reading. The room became silent. Everyone listened. No one interrupted. No one moved. For the next 20 minutes, she read aloud from pages worn soft by years of handling. Harlan could not hear every word, but he could see what those words meant. Hope, comfort, belonging. The people gathered around her were not waiting for food. They were waiting for her. And for the first time since following her, Harlan realized he understood nothing. The following day, he could not stop thinking about what he had seen. Questions followed him everywhere. Who were those people? How long had Mabel known them? Why had she never mentioned them? Most importantly, why would someone devote 5 years of their life to people living inside an abandoned construction site? The answers arrived slowly. Harlan began researching. He learned the artist's name was Andre Callum Priest, 24 years old, mute since childhood, abandoned by relatives after his mother died. The woman with crutches was Vera Denise Steele, diagnosed with cerebral palsy, lost access to support services after aging out of state programs. The third resident was Tobias Reed Cannon. A neurological condition prevented him from forming long-term memories. He frequently forgot what happened the previous day, yet somehow he always remembered Mabel. Every single night. The more Harlan learned, the more confusing the situation became. What connected them? Why Mabel? Why these specific people? Then one evening, he discovered the answer. Hidden among public records was a name. Mabel Fontaine. The surname caught his attention immediately. Fontaine, one of San Francisco's oldest families. A name associated with money, property, influence. Yet the Mabel he knew worked as a maid. The contradiction made no sense. Curiosity became obsession, and obsession led him into a history buried 17 years earlier. When Mabel was 11 years old, both of her parents died within 6 months of each other. Her father first, her mother shortly afterward. The tragedy made local news at the time. The Fontaines possessed considerable wealth, properties, investments, trust funds, millions of dollars. According to public records, custody transferred to Mabel's aunt, Gloria Fontaine. And that was where everything became strange. Within 2 years, nearly every asset connected to Mabel's inheritance disappeared. Properties sold, trust accounts liquidated, businesses dissolved. By the time Mabel reached adulthood, almost nothing remained. Legally, everything appeared proper. Technically, but Harlan had spent decades studying contracts, and the paperwork felt wrong. Pieces fit together too neatly. Questions lacked answers. Someone had been very careful, very thorough, and very successful. Harlan continued digging. Then he discovered something that made his stomach tighten. Gloria Fontaine was not a stranger. He knew her. Not well, but well enough. They had attended charity dinners together, fundraisers, business events. He had sat across from her 11 times during the last 4 years. 11 times. While believing she was a respected philanthropist. 11 times. Without realizing she might have stolen an orphan child's future. That night, Harlan returned to the abandoned construction site. This time he did not hide. He stepped into the light. Everyone stopped. Silence filled the room. Mabel stood slowly. Confusion crossed her face. Then concern. Then resignation. As though she believed she already knew why he had come. You followed me. It was not a question. Harlan nodded. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, he asked the question that had consumed him for weeks. Who are they to you? Mabel looked around the room. At Andre, Vera, Tobias. Her answer came softly. They're my family. No dramatic speech followed. No elaborate explanation. Just 3 simple words. They're my family. And somehow those words carried more weight than anything else she could have said. Over the next hour, she told him everything. After losing her parents, she had spent years moving between lawyers, guardians, schools, and relatives. People discussed money constantly. Her future, her inheritance, her assets. Yet nobody asked how she felt. Nobody asked whether she was lonely. Nobody asked whether she was afraid. When she turned 18 and discovered most of her inheritance had vanished, she stopped fighting. The legal system was complicated. The evidence was hidden. The people responsible were powerful. So she walked away. Years later, she met Andre. Then Vera. Then Tobias. One connection led to another. Eventually, she found herself helping people who had been forgotten. People society passed every day without seeing. People who needed someone. Just someone. And for 5 years, she returned every night. Not because she had to. Because she wanted to. Harlan listened quietly. Then he asked a question. Why never tell anyone? Mabel smiled sadly. Because helping people isn't supposed to be a performance. Those words stayed with him. For days. For weeks. And ultimately, they changed everything. Harlan hired investigators. Forensic accountants. Attorneys. What began as curiosity became a mission. Months passed. Records surfaced. Witnesses emerged. Bank transfers appeared. Documents previously hidden came into view. The picture became undeniable. Gloria Fontaine had spent 17 years protecting a lie, and the lie was finally collapsing. The confrontation happened inside Gloria's office. No reporters, no cameras, no audience. Just three people: Gloria, Mabel, and Harlan. When the evidence appeared on the table, Gloria stopped denying everything. Instead, she justified it. She claimed she deserved compensation. She claimed she protected the family. She claimed Mabel was too young to understand. Excuses filled the room, one after another, until finally Mabel interrupted. She asked only one question: did my parents love me? The room fell silent. Even Gloria looked surprised. Money, properties, inheritance. None of it mattered in that moment. Mabel was asking something deeper, something she had carried since childhood. Gloria's answer came slowly. More than anything, Mabel closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, tears appeared. Because despite everything stolen from her, despite every betrayal, despite 17 years of deception, the one thing she feared most had never been true. She had never been unwanted. She had never been forgotten. She had always been loved. The lawsuits eventually ended. Properties were recovered. Funds returned. Justice arrived. At least as much justice as possible after nearly 2 decades. But that was not the ending. The ending came months later. Harlan visited the construction site one final time. Except it was no longer a construction site. The recovered money had funded housing, support services, education programs, medical care, not just for Andre, not just for Vera, not just for Tobias, for dozens of others. The forgotten corner of the city had become something entirely different, a place where people belonged. As Harlan walked through the building, he noticed Andre working on a new drawing. The sketch showed 4 figures standing beneath a light: Mabel, Vera, Tobias, and a 4th figure, Harlan. He stared at it quietly, then laughed. For years, he believed wealth was measured in numbers, accounts, investments, assets. But standing there, surrounded by lives changed through simple acts of kindness, he finally understood something Mabel had known all along. The most valuable thing a person can possess is not money. It is the ability to make another person feel seen. And sometimes the smallest acts reveal the biggest truths. If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments what part stayed with you the most. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story. Until next time, thank you for watching.